لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها، وإن كل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. My dear brothers and sisters, I want to begin today's khutbah by making dua for the innocent people in Palestine, our brothers and sisters who, as we all know, have continually lived under a brutal occupation and are facing horrors that are truly unimaginable to us. Even though we see videos and we see pictures and we see news reports, we really truly do not understand and cannot fully comprehend the pain and suffering that our brothers and sisters are going through. And so we want to make sure that in our prayers, in our dua, we are constantly seeking the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are remembering the innocent lives of our brothers and sisters constantly in our du'as. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring them relief. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring them victory. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make every ounce of pain and suffering that they go through a means for them to enter Jannah. Allahumma ameen. My brothers and sisters, I also want to warn you today. I want to warn you of a mindset that the enemies of Islam want for us. And the biggest enemy of Islam is without a doubt the shaitan. What they want for us and what the shaitan wants for us is to lose hope. The main goal of the shaitan with the children of Adam is that we lose hope. His name, Iblis, comes from the verb ablasa, which in Arabic means to lose hope. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَوْمَ تَقُومُ السَّاعَةِ يُبْلِسُ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. That on the day when the hour is established, the criminals, they will be in a state of iblas, in a state of despair. And so this is what the name Iblis means, to lose hope, a loss of hope. So without a doubt, the shaitan wants that in these difficult moments, we lose hope. I understand, my brothers and sisters, that many of us are feeling very helpless. I understand that the stream of suffering that we witness and are witnessing now on a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute basis is indeed very troubling. And indeed, it is having a psychological and emotional effect on our well-being. But we cannot let it have an effect on our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because a loss of hope affects our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if we turn to Allah, if we turn to the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we turn to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will not lose hope. If we turn to the means of guidance that Allah has given to us, my brothers and sisters, we will remain steadfast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, reminds us, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ اللَّهَ غَافِلًا. Do not think Allah is unaware. عَمَّا يَعْمَلُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Do not think Allah is unaware of what the zalimun, the oppressors, the wrongdoers are doing. Meaning everything that is happening, Allah knows. Every ounce, every type of injustice that is taking place, everything is being recorded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّمَا يُؤَخِّرُهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ تَشْخَصُ فِيهِ الْأَبْصَارِ. Allah is only delaying them, meaning the wrongdoers, and any type of wrongdoing that occurs in this dunya, in this world, in this worldly life, whether it be on a global scale, whether it be on a communal scale, even in our personal lives, because as I know, my brothers and sisters, sometimes we, even on a personal level, we face injustices. We face those people who have wronged us, and sometimes the shaitan can whisper to us and say, how is it possible that this person who has done so much wrong, so much oppression, how is it that they're leading a nice, comfortable life? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the book of Allah, our source of guidance, don't think Allah is unaware of what the zalimun do. Allah only delays them until a day when their eyes will stare in horror. Meaning the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is severe. The punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swift. But we have to keep things in proper perspective. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the book of Allah, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give glad tidings, good news to those who are patient. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ. Those that when they're afflicted with a calamity, with a difficulty, with a hardship, قَالُوا, they say, إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Certainly we belong to Allah, and to Allah we will return. This is our aqeedah, my brothers and sisters. This is our faith. This is who we are. This is part of our identity, that we belong to Allah. Everything that we go through in our lives, it happens by the will and the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This life is temporary, my brothers and sisters. Our bodies, our nafs, doesn't belong to us. It belongs to Allah, and we will all, those suffering, those not suffering, those witnessing, we all will return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ultimate hisab, the ultimate accountability is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once again, we turn to the book of Allah. أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةِ. Do you think that you will enter paradise? وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. When you have not yet learned from the example of those who came before you. مَسَّتْهُمُ الْبَأْسَاءُ وَالضَّرَّاءُ وَزُلْزِلُوا. They were afflicted with adversity and hardship, and they were shaken. زُلْزِلُوا حَتَّى يَقُولَ الرَّسُولُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ. They were shaken to the point that the messenger himself and those who believed with him, meaning the companions radiallahu anhum wardahum ajma'een, that generation, even they said, Mata Nasrullah, when will the help of Allah come? And I know we are feeling this right now. We are seeing the atrocities being committed. We are watching a genocide take place in front of our eyes in real time. We are witnessing a genocide, and we say to ourselves, Mata Nasrullah, when is the help of Allah? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded the believers that certainly, Ala inna nasrallahi qareeb. Certainly the help of Allah is close, and it takes on a very different meaning for the believers. Because when a believer hears the word qareeb, close, it is not just about closeness in this life. A believer understands that this life is short, that this life is temporary, that qareeb means that maybe in this life we do not see relief. It is possible. There are those who suffer and go through trials, and the relief doesn't come in this life. But a believer understands that their akhirah is qareeb, their akhirah is near, and the ultimate justice will take place in the akhirah. And so the help of Allah, either in this life or the afterlife, all of it is close. My brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, that the best outcome is for those who have taqwa, those who are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who live their lives in consciousness of Allah. And what that means is our spirituality is part of everything that we go through in life. Whether it be the good times, we're thinking of Allah, or the hard times, we are thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So do not let distress distract you from your relationship with Allah, from turning to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because my brothers and sisters, in these moments of difficulty, if we are turning to other than the book of Allah, there is a problem. There is a problem in our faith. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, Al-Qur'anu hujjatun laka aw alayk. The Qur'an will come as a witness for you or against you, meaning on the day of judgment. And so as believers, we claim to be people of Iman. We claim to be people of Islam. But if in these moments we are distant from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is our relationship with the Quran? Because the Prophet ﷺ only gave us two parties. There's no third. Either we will come on the day of judgment, and the Quran will come as an intercessor for us, as an intermediary for us, as a proof and witness for us. These people, when life seemed difficult, when life seemed complicated and messy, and when people were losing hope, they turned to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, these are your people. The Quran comes as a witness for us, or the Quran comes as a witness against us. That when matters became difficult, they began to rely on outside means. They looked everywhere but the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ, we send down from the Quran, مَا هُوَ الشِّفَاء, that which is a cure, وَرَحْمَةً, and a mercy, not for everyone, لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, for the believers. This is one approach, this is one party. The believers, for them, when they recite the Quran, when they do tadabbur and reflect upon the Quran, when they act upon the Quran becomes shifa for them. This difficult moments that we are feeling, this heavy heart that we are feeling right now, this loss of hope that we are feeling right now, my brothers and sisters, if we recite the Quran and act upon the Quran becomes shifa. The Quran becomes a cure for this sadness and this pain that we are feeling right now, and it becomes, my brothers and sisters, a rahmah. It becomes a mercy for us. It becomes a mercy for the believers. On the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. As for the oppressors, as for the wrongdoers, it only increases them in loss. And so we ask ourselves, what does our relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala look like right now? Not just as a flourish for our lives. Some of us, we treat the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as an accessory. We treat it as a piece of ornament. When someone is getting married, we pull out the Quran. Before we start dancing and singing and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's recite the Quran. We treat it as an ornament. We use it to begin our gatherings, which is good, alhamdulillah. We should recite the Quran. We use it just as a form of entertainment, some of us. Just listening to the Quran without anything entering our hearts. An ornament, a means of decoration. That is not the purpose of the Quran, my brothers and sisters. Even our scholars of the past, they would tell us that sometimes people are fooled that the purpose of the Quran, and I know this may seem controversial to some people, that the purpose of the Quran is to memorize the Quran and to recite the Quran. The purpose, and I hate to say this to you, my brothers and sisters, of the Quran is not to memorize the Quran and to recite the Quran. Yes, that is part of our relationship with the Quran, but that is not the purpose of the Quran. You know, our scholars of the past, they would say that a person may memorize the whole Quran from beginning to end. However, this person, as a hafiz of the Quran, shows up on the Day of Judgment, and the Quran stands as a witness against the hafiz. And another person memorizes just a little bit from the Quran. But for this person, even though they hadn't memorized the entire Quran, the Quran comes as a witness for them. How? Perhaps the person who memorized the whole Quran was the only relationship they had with it. They never reflected upon the Quran. They never acted upon the Quran. They never took the message of the Quran to the heart. They never lived their life by the Quran. So even though the Quran was memorized, it was never acted upon. So the entirety of the Quran shows up as a hujjah, as a proof, as a witness against this person. But perhaps another person who had a few ayat, few verses, few surahs from the Quran memorized, they memorized a little bit, but they acted upon the entire Quran. And so now this person comes on the Day of Judgment, even though they had memorized a little bit, but they acted upon the entire Quran. So the entire Quran comes as a proof for them on the Day of Judgment. And so we have to ask ourselves, my brothers and sisters, where do we stand with the Quran? Qatada rahimahullah ta'ala, one of our early scholars, he said a person sits with the Quran and only two things happen. One of two things happen. Either we sit with the Quran and it brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it increases this person. Or a person sits with the Quran and this person becomes distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no third party. The Quran is a proof for us or a proof against us. There's no neutral party here. Because we are responsible, my brothers and sisters, for the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us. We are responsible for what type of relationship we have with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The early generation, the scholars, they would say perhaps a person recites the Quran, reads the Quran, and the whole time the Quran is cursing this person who is reciting the Quran. How? How is it that a person is reciting the Quran and the Quran is cursing this person? I'll tell you how. They are reciting the book of Allah, and in the book of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the wrongdoers, the oppressors, and the sinful, and so on and so forth. And this person, as they're reciting the Quran, they're living that life. A person recites, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. Do you believe in part of the book and do you leave part? This person is reciting this ayah, but they are doing that very thing. So the Quran is speaking about this person as they are reciting the Quran. That only happens, my brothers and sisters, when we abandon the Quran. When we leave the Quran only, as I said, as a means of beautification, or only for memorization and recitation. Don't get me wrong, memorization and the reciting of the Quran are an important part of our relationship with the Quran. But if it is void or devoid of acting upon the Quran, meaning the shaitan has fooled us that because you memorized, you're done with the Quran. Because you read the Quran, even though you didn't apply it in your life, you didn't live your life by it, you didn't turn to it in your times of difficulty, that perhaps you have done your best with the Quran. That is a deception from the shaitan. Al-Quran, Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, "Unzil al-Quran liyu'mala bihi." The Quran was revealed so that you act upon it. Not that you just recite it. If we recite it and we don't act upon it, the purpose of the Quran is missing. If we are not living our lives by the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my brothers and sisters, the purpose of the Quran is missing in our lives. And you know, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, complain to Allah about these types of people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Ya Rabbi, my Lord, إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. My Lord, my people, قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ, they have taken this Qur'an as something which is abandoned. They have abandoned the Qur'an. This miracle is sitting with them. They live with the Qur'an, yet they have abandoned the Qur'an. And I know someone will say, this is speaking about the mushrikun of that time, and that is correct. It is speaking about the mushrikun of the Quraysh at that time, that they had the Qur'an being revealed right in front of them, and they abandoned it. But our scholars say, ask the question, why? What does it mean to abandon the Qur'an? What it means to abandon the Qur'an is that we hear the Qur'an, but we don't apply it. The mushrikun heard the Qur'an, but they did not apply it. So if we are a people who hear the Qur'an, we read the Qur'an, but we do not apply the Qur'an, then indeed we have taken the Qur'an as something that is abandoned. If we hear the Qur'an but do not live by the Qur'an, we hear instructions in the Qur'an but we do not live by the Qur'an, we have abandoned the Qur'an. If we hear in the Qur'an that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gone to war with those who take interest and deal in interest, and it does nothing for us, it doesn't shake us, then there's something wrong. Have we abandoned the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وسيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My brothers and sisters, we said, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم القرآن حجة لك أو عليك. The Quran is a proof for you or against you. The Quran will come on the day of judgment as a witness for you or a witness against you. And we talked about all the ways that the Quran may come. May Allah protect us and save us as a witness against us. Allahumma ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the Quran a witness for us on the day of judgment. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, اقرأوا القرآن فإنه يأتي يوم القيامة شفيعا لأصحابه. Recite the Quran. Live your life by the Quran, because it will come on the day of judgment as an intercessor for its people. You know, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam also told us, يؤتى بالقرآن يوم القيامة وَأَهْلِهِ الَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ بِهِ. The Quran will be brought on the day of judgment, brought as a witness, and the people of the Quran, وَأَهْلِهِ. But notice what the Prophet ﷺ referred to as the people of the Quran in this hadith. الَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ بِهِ. The people of the Quran, those who act upon the Quran. Those who live their lives by the Quran, not those who simply read the Quran, or those who memorized the Quran, or those who recited the Quran at a family gathering, or those who played the Quran in their car, or those who played it at a wedding, or those who played it at a graduation, or those who turned to the Quran only here or there. Those who acted upon the Quran, those who lived their lives by the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ told us that on the day of judgment, the Quran will come and say to a person, هَلْ تَعْرِفُنِي? Do you know me? And the Quran will say, أَنَا الَّذِي أَسْهَرْتُ لَيْلَكَ. I am the one who kept you up at night, and I am the one who made you thirsty during the day. This is what a relationship with the Quran looks like. That a person, when the Quran comes as an intercessor, as a witness for this person, they are the ones who stayed up at night reciting and reflecting and living the Quran. Those who spent their days reciting and reading and memorizing and contemplating the Quran and applying the Quran in their lives. This is the type of person who the Quran will come as an intercessor for them on the day of judgment. My brothers and sisters, I know some people may look at this and say, if the Quran is either going to come as a proof for me or against me, well, it's better that I don't recite the Quran, I don't memorize the Quran, I don't turn to the Quran. But once again, this is a trap from the shaitan. Because as I mentioned earlier, the solution is not, hey, I don't want access to this knowledge. Some people think the Quran will come for a witness for me or against me. Well, I'm just not going to look at the Quran. And my brothers and sisters, indeed that is a loss. Because as I said in the beginning of this sermon, beginning of this khutbah, my brothers and sisters, if we are not turning to guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these difficult moments in our lives, then what are we doing? Where's our aqeedah? What is the difference between a believer who suffers and a disbeliever who suffers? What is the difference between a believer who goes through difficulty in their lives and someone who is not a believer who goes through difficulty in their lives? What is the difference? The difference, my brothers and sisters, has to be who we rely upon, who we turn to, Allah Jalla wa Ala. The difference has to be that as believers we understand that this Quran is a book that we constantly live with and live by in all aspects of our lives. That we want to be the people that live by the Quran, by acting upon the Quran, that we recite the Quran. We make an effort to understand the Quran. We contemplate the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنِ? Do they not contemplate, think about, ponder the Quran? Pondering the Quran means you make an effort beyond just recitation and memorization. Contemplating the Quran means whatever you're going through in your life right now, that you take the Quran out and you say, what does the Quran say about what I'm dealing with right now? And so the test for us, my brothers and sisters, right now is, are we turning to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are we seeking guidance and comfort and tranquility and honor in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Those are the people of the Quran. Are we the ones who do tadabbur of the Quran, and when we hear the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the verses and signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we make an effort to live our lives by the Quran? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from the Ahl al-Quran, from the people of the Quran, from the people of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to turn to the Quran in our times of difficulty and hardship and sorrow. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the book of Allah shifa for us, a cure for us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a rahmah, a mercy for us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that when we come on the day of judgment, that the Quran shows and comes as a witness for us, taking us to Jannah. Allahumma ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring relief to our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring relief and comfort to all those suffering around the world today. Allahumma ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us firmness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make these times of distress a times in which we turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My brothers and sisters, if you're looking for a sign from Allah, then know that everything happens in this world is a sign from Allah. In your life, you may feel helpless. You may think, I can do nothing. But know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed everything that will happen. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge. Yes, we try our best, but a believer, my brothers and sisters, never feels helpless. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant izzah and honor to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give victory to our brothers and sisters in Palestine. Allahumma ameen. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. إن الله يأمركم بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروه يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون قوموا لصلاتكم يرحمكم الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا واعتدلوا رحمكم الله. Please make sure your rows are straight, stand close to one another. Do not leave any gaps and pray as if it is your last prayer. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First, I want to say Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Saad, for blessing us with your presence, blessing our community with your presence, and we hope to see you here more often. Second, I want to remind you guys that Sheikh Saad Tasleem is visiting us from Maryland to teach a weekend seminar called Quranic Vibes. Inshallah, he will be going over 21 principles from the Quran that we can implement into our daily lives. The class will start tonight. It will be Sana Masjid Taqwa, and it will continue tomorrow and Sunday at U of H. If you are interested in sign up for the class, we have a table outside. You are more than welcome to stop by the table and ask any questions. Inshallah, we will get your answer. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. For all of you, Assalamu alaikum. For all of you who have already seen the statement that ISGH released today, I wanted to make sure there was a small call for action at the end. I want to make sure everybody goes over that. Inshallah, there's going to be a protest tomorrow. If you feel you can be there, then take yourself, take your families, remind your friends, everybody, try to show up in large numbers. Please make sure that you're following the local rules and regulations, right? We're not breaking any law by doing it and everything else, so make sure you're doing that. Contact your local elected officials or anybody else that you need to show your feelings about it. If you see any media that is showing wrong information, please contact them. But also at the end, please make sure you're making dua for our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We have Parvez Agwan who's going to address the audience, and then I have a few more important announcements.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Just 2 minutes and I'll be brief. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I want to ask everyone a serious question with what's going on in Gaza. Where are our Muslim leaders? We become doctors, our kids become lawyers, we send our kids to engineering school. Just yesterday, Israel said they were going to invade Gaza. That's a genocide that's about to happen. Where are our Muslim leaders that can stop this? Right? In Surah Al-Imran, right? Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnasi ta'muruna bil ma'ruf. That's who we are as Muslims. We enjoin what is good, forbid what is evil. Right? Where are our Muslim leaders? This is the second largest Muslim population in the country, in Houston. How come we don't have a single Muslim governor, a single Muslim senator? There's nobody to look at Biden and Blinken and pressure them to say, stop it, this is wrong. We don't have a single Muslim in the cabinet. We're going to change that from here in Houston, from here in Sugarland. My name is Parvez Agwan. Come outside and see our table. I'm a product of Fort Bend County and Maryam Masjid. I've been praying Tarawih here. I grew up right down the street. I've been here for the last 20 years. And I'm proud to represent you in the U.S. Congress, inshallah, because if I win, I would be the first Muslim and the first Asian ever elected to Congress from Texas. And inshallah, I'd also be the youngest at 31. And we can do this because times are bad out there right now. If you look at what's happening in Gaza, At this very moment, your elected leadership for this area in Sugarland just sided and approved the invasion. We have to fight back against people who are taking millions of dollars from special interest groups like AIPAC. And I'm proud to stand before you today telling you not only do we have a fighting chance, we will win if the Muslims vote in this area. We will win. So my ask of everyone here to keep it brief: bring us 10 votes and start getting Muslims into office. If we win, and the chances are very strong, Maryam Masjid is a voting center. February 20th, voting starts. If you're not registered to vote, you need to do your civic duty, because we need to start putting pressure on this system. We don't have anybody on the inside that can look at them in the eye and say, stop this genocide, stop appropriating aid to Israel. And we have to stop this now. Parvez Agwan, come volunteer. February 20th, bring 10 of your family members to vote, because nothing will change unless we do our bare minimum, which is our civic duty. Inshallah, meet us outside and come volunteer. Thank you so much.
Inshallah, we're going to have our fall carnival tomorrow from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. All the proceeds, all the money that we make from that carnival, inshallah, will be used towards the relief for our brothers and sisters in Palestine. So any profit that the masjid makes or any money that anybody makes, inshallah, will be donated towards that. There is a sisters class tomorrow. It's from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's on Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, Word, and the class is free, so please register for that. Also, there is a petition that is going online to try to make Eid as a holiday for this area, for Forbin ISD. So please sign that petition as well. Keep the entire community in your du'as, and please pray for all the brothers and sisters suffering everywhere. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.